tonight. Let's start with, I think, the team that was most impressive tonight, which is the Iowa Hawkeyes, who came into Ann Arbor on senior night and gave them a little bit of revenge because Michigan went down to Iowa and knocked them off just a couple weeks ago. And all of a sudden, Michigan finds themselves again truly on the bubble, probably need a win in their final game of the regular season to feel safe. Gentlemen, Iowa is really, I think, slept on from a metrics perspective right now. I mean, the metrics are higher on them than the national narrative is. If you look at KenPom, Iowa is neck and neck with Purdue. I mean, statistically similar, top 5 offenses in the country, fringe top 100 defenses. They've got a National Player of the Year candidate in Keegan Murray, who just continues to impress night in and night out. Rob, is Iowa a team that can truly make a second weekend in March?
I would not be surprised to see it happen. Now, look, I've been one of the people that has been talking about how I'm not a buyer in Purdue, right? And how I don't think that Purdue belongs in the same conversation as some of the top teams in the country. I think Purdue belongs in the same conversation as teams like Iowa, where you say, look, if they get the right matchup, this is a team that's explosive enough offensively. They can win a game, 2, maybe even 3, potentially win 4. Like if things are going right for them, they're actually playing a little bit of defense. I think if I'm Purdue, the same way I'm looking at this with Iowa, I would be happy if I get to a second weekend with this group. And I think this Iowa team would be happy if they could get to a second weekend. It's unbelievable when you think about it. They lost the National Player of the Year, and they're probably as good, if not better than they were a season ago. They're 14th in KenPom. I don't think people realize this. They've now won 5 in a row, right? They've now won 8 out of 9. They are sitting at 12-7 in the Big Ten, 22-8 overall. These are the teams that they've beaten in the last 2 weeks. Ohio State on the road, Michigan State at home, Nebraska, they don't really count. Northwestern as a mid-major. And then they just won at Michigan by 11 points, right? They've been blowing teams out. I think that they're being slept on nationally in terms of just how good and how dangerous they can be offensively. I absolutely think they can get to a second weekend.
Ashton, where do you stand on that?
I agree. And the reason I say that is they have, Keegan Murray is a first-round pick to me. The way he can just take over a game in the scheme of things like that. That's what you need in an NCAA tournament. Obviously, I was in college when Kemba Walker was, on a path that was unprecedented. But anytime you have a team that has an identity similar to Iowa, they push the ball. They know who they are. Defensively, I think they're solid enough. And they can score it. And they also dominate the boards. I think they do a really good job on the boards. So anytime, you have that identity, you have a player that's big time that can take over games at any time. He literally could be the best player on the court in any game in the NCAA tournament. I think the sky's the limit.
All right, Ashton, I got to ask you a question since you brought it up. Group chats that Gary McGee is on. Do you guys still roast him for what happened? Do you let him have it? Like,
not as much. We did tell him to cut his hair. So people wouldn't know it was him.
So with Iowa for me, if you look at last year, right, everybody had them as a quote unquote national contender. I don't know that anybody thought they were a real title contender, but like they were a top 5 team consensus for the majority of the season. People expected a Sweet 16 last year. Ultimately, it didn't happen. But then this year, I mean, they haven't been a top 25 team really at all, start to finish. And guys, they're essentially the same team as they were last season. I know Luka Garza's gone, but statistically, everything they do is identical to last season. And I think, if I had a vote for Big Ten Player of the Year, I said this earlier tonight, and I got a little bit of crap from it from Wisconsin fans, rightfully so. I would vote for Keegan Murray as the Big Ten Player of the Year. And part of that is because I think Wisconsin's supporting cast is a little better than people truly make it out to be. I've heard a lot of that team wouldn't even make the NIT, and Johnny Davis has dragged them to the position they're in. Johnny Davis is 100% a big reason why, but he also had a full month and a half of the Big Ten season where he shot sub 40% from the floor on some very tough shots, and that team was still winning games. So
You're
I don't
just a Johnny Davis hater. This is confirmed.
It's not a Johnny Davis hater. He's a first-team All-American, Rob. But I better watch how I say this. What I am is a really big fan of Keegan Murray's. Okay, the guy's a first-team All-American, but he's making Iowa's defense look good. Do you know how hard it is to make a Fran McCaffrey defense look good?
The one thing I would say is this: when Iowa went to the NCAA tournament last season, they ranked 50th in adjusted defensive efficiency according to Ken Palm's metrics. That's going into the tournament. It looks a lot worse after they got the score run up on them by Oregon in the second round. This year's team is 74th in adjusted defensive efficiency. So I don't think that they're quite as good. What I will say is this: when they decide to put their defensive lineup on the floor this year, I actually think that there are times when they can be really effective. Now, that's when they have the Toussaint kid at the point and that freshman, I'm blanking on his name. Someone else, Tony Perkins. Yeah, Tony Perkins. They put him out there with the two Murray brothers, maybe get Patrick McCaffrey. You're long, you're athletic. They throw in that like 3/4 court press, and they can really frustrate teams. But the problem is when you do that, you take away some of the more effective players that you have. You don't have Jordan Bohannon on the floor, so it kind of limits what you can be. And I think that there's a legitimate concern, the same thing with Purdue, that your best offensive team and your best defensive team, they don't overlap a lot. And when you have teams like that, like I get concerned about them. They become, to me, something where it's matchup specific in the tournament. Now, can Keegan Murray just go bananas and average 35 a game and just throw this team on his back and carry them to the tournament because they're going to score 95 every night? You just cannot stop them. I would not be shocked if that happened. Right? Like he's a very good player, but I do think that there are some limitations to this Iowa team that keep them from being someone that I would say is a true Final Four contender, right? Like I think that they're just below that tier. I think Purdue is just below that tier. And frankly, Ashton, I don't think there's a single team in the Big Ten that I would say is a Final Four contender. Not Illinois,
contender,
not Iowa,
contender.
Really? Yeah, so, I don't think I would say. I mean,
favorite is a word, but you don't think there's a team that could make a Final Four? Because that's what contender means to me. Like, can you see a 2-week winning streak where they win 4 straight?
Absolutely, but I don't think that there's a team where I would say, okay, favorite. The favorite's probably the better nomenclature there. We're saying the same thing.
Okay.
I do think it's hard to scout Iowa in terms of the NCAA tournament. You don't have much time to scout when you have a guy like Keegan Murray, and then they take care of the ball on offense. I think they're actually a tough team to scout for in a short period of time, and they can use that to their advantage. Also, like you said, defensively they turn you over, and Joe Toussaint, I think he does a good job of just pushing the ball. But anytime you can score like that, I think it's really tough to scout in a short period of time. And anytime you have a big time player that can take over a game at will, I think that's what it comes down to when you have such a short period of time. The scouting is going to be huge in the NCAA tournament.
In conference play only, Iowa actually had the 5th best defense in the Big Ten, which I'm not saying a lot of Big Ten defenses because Purdue is not very good on that end. Michigan State's been bad on that end, but they've been better than most people realize. Quickly, we do need to get to Michigan State, Ohio State. Just quickly on Michigan. Is this team going to make the tournament? Rob, what do you think?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't think that they are. Who do they have? They still have is it Michigan? Who do they play on the last?
They are at Ohio State for the final game of the regular season, and the Fielding the 68 show told me if they go 1-2, they are basically right on the line of last 4 in, first 4 out.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Here's my thing: do you want Michigan or Rutgers? Michigan, Rutgers, Indiana. It doesn't feel like you're going to get all 3 of those teams in for the Big Ten.
Yeah. Rutgers
maybe 2. I think Rutgers at this point. I think you would probably have to take Rutgers, but like they could also go into Ohio State and beat Ohio State by 30.
I take my Michigan fan hat off. I'd rather watch Rutgers play basketball right now. I'll tell you that. Those guys are a lot more fun to watch. We're extremely close to getting a potential Michigan-Wisconsin rematch in the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament, by the way. Couple things need to shake out, but it's the likely outcome is Michigan, Indiana in the 8-9 game. Winner gets Wisconsin. So fingers crossed.
I don't want to see that.
No,
I don't want to see that. the game is going to be whistled so tight that every single person of relevance is going to be sitting on the bench with 2 fouls 8 minutes into the game. Right? It's going to be nothing but free throws. There's going to be 400 foul calls because they're just going to say, we're not going to let this get to the point of what happened last year. Now, the only way to avoid that is by actually giving Juwan Howard 2 fouls in the first half, so he has to sit on the bench. That's probably the key.